Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. In the previous session, we spoke about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where the surah mentions that not only did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide reprieve for Ibrahim alayhi salam, but also commanded him to migrate to a place of peace, comfort, and blessing. Additionally, he also granted him his family, right? His family flourished. He made dua for a child. He got Ishaq alayhi salam, and then we also saw that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a favor also granted him Yaqub alayhi salam, and he made all of them prophets, right? Now, when the surah talks about rescuing Ibrahim alayhi salam, we also found the mention of Lut alayhi salam, who was the nephew of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Lut alayhi salam was sent as a prophet and messenger to the people of Mu'tafiqat, right? And those are the people that we find a brief reference of in this passage that we're going to do today, 74 to 77. So it's not just the community of Lut alayhi salam, but also the community of Nuh. Both of them mentioned very briefly before we move on to the mention of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam. So the story of Lut alayhi salam is related in full detail elsewhere in the Quran. Here, like I said, we have only a brief reference to it, the inevitable punishment that came upon his community due to their shameful conduct. So بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولوطا آتيناه حكما وعلما. And also remember the circumstances of Lut, right? And also remember the circumstances. This is all implied over here, right? And also remember the circumstances of Lut alayhi salam, who we granted hukman. What's the meaning of hukman? Wisdom, right? Meaning a very intelligent mind. He was able to process circumstances intellectually, right? And also granted him knowledge. And then what else? وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ تَعْمَلُ الْخَبَائِثَ. And we rescued him from a town, from a community which was engrossed in, or that used to carry out ta'mal, right? Carry out al-khaba'ith, shameful, obscene, repulsive behavior. And this, by the way, is plural. Okay, it's the plural of khabitha. All right, so again, and we rescued him from a town, from a community that would carry out shameless, obscene, repulsive behavior. Note that the primary shameless behavior that this community engaged in was homosexuality. But we see that a plural form is used over here when it refers to conduct, right? Implying that there were other shameful acts that this community carried out as well. What were those? So homosexuality was the primary shameless behavior, right? But other than that, they also were involved in committing shirk, and also oppression was prevalent in that community. Who did they oppress? They oppressed the people who chose to follow the message of Lut alayhi salam, who wanted to remain on the true path, right? So this word khaba'ith in the plural form is referring to not just homosexuality, but also these other acts of evil that consisted of that existed in that society. However, homosexuality was the dominant evil in that community. Now, next, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing these people further, He says, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمَ سَوْءٍ. They were a people of evil. قَوْمَ سَوْءٍ, people of evil, meaning they personified evil. فَاسِقِينَ, and they were rebellious. They transgressed openly against Allah's commands. They crossed all boundaries. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after describing that evil community, he talks about Lut alayhi salam, and implied in that it's also the people who believed in Lut alayhi salam. In ayah number 75, وَأَدْخَلْنَاهُ, therefore we entered him, the him referring to Lut alayhi salam over here, we entered him in our rahmah, meaning we admitted him into our mercy by saving him from his rebellious community, by removing him from that place. إِنَّهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, indeed he was truly from the righteous. Take away from this story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah is a place of refuge, right, into which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admits whoever he wills, so that they find peace, comfort, and blessings. And that's the story of Lut alayhi salam. A very brief mention, followed by the story of Lut alayhi salam. Similarly, is a short reference to the story of Nuh alayhi salam. So in ayah number 76, when Nuhan, and remember the circumstances of Nuh, إِذْ نَادَى, when he called out, when he cried. Implied is when he cried to us. What did he cry about, or what is this referring to? The cry over here is referring to the call of Nuh alayhi salam, referring to his dua of Nuh alayhi salam that we find in Surah 71, ayah number 26. This is Surah Nuh, which isn't just about it, and the dua that he makes against his people. So let me just translate this ayah first, and remember the circumstances of Nuh when he called or made dua against his people before, min qablu, before what? Before Ibrahim alayhi salam, before Ishaq alayhi salam, before Lut alayhi salam. All the prophets that were mentioned before the mention of Nuh alayhi salam, they are being referenced. Nuh alayhi salam came before all of these people. So that's what from before is referring to, all right, the timeline. So, and remember the circumstances of Nuh when he made a dua against his people before all these, before Ibrahim and before Lut. And what was that dua? قال Nuh, Nuh said, Rabbi, my Rabb, la tadhar ala al-ard, do not leave on the face of this earth, in terms of the disbelievers, from the disbelievers, a single person, the yara. Nuh alayhi salam spent centuries inviting people, inviting the people from his community who were immersed in shirk. They refused to accept his message. Once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear to him that no one from his community was going to accept, it is then he made this dua with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He made this dua against them, right? And like the ayah mentions, min qablu, yani before the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Lut alayhi salam. When he makes this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts it, and that's what is mentioned over here. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ, and we responded to his dua. فَنَجَّيْنَاهُ, and as a result of that, فَنَجَّيْنَاهُ, we rescued him and his family and his companions from min al-karb al-azim, from the great calamity. And what was that great calamity? The great flood, right? The great flood, meaning we rescued them, or we saved them from being drowned in that storm. Ayah number 77, وَنَصَرْنَاهُ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا, and we saved, or we helped him from and against a nation, the nation that used to deny, kadhabu, that used to deny our ayahs, our signs that indicated that Nuh alayhi salam was indeed the messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Innahum kanu qawma saw'in, indeed they were a nation of evil, meaning they personified evil. Therefore, as a result, فَأَغْرَقْنَاهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ, we drowned them all. So that brings us to the end of the brief mention of the story of Lut alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam. Following this is a fairly detailed account of an episode in the life of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam. Inshallah, in the next session.